My name is Daniel Unfleet. I am the founder of Kindbridge Behavioral Health. We are a digital first health company that works very closely with a handful of operators in the US and states across the country, as well as Canada and in Puerto Rico. We take healthcare directly to the front lines. Any individual that needs assistance for gambling related harms on platforms gets direct access to our trained clinicians, and we help states capacity build so that they have expertise when this issue starts to crop up and become a little bit more publicly known. About 3 months ago, I was approached to participate in a group called the Better Gambling Forum. The Better Gambling Forum is a coalition that comprises of public health professionals, mental health providers, gambling casino operators, regulators, researchers, and advocacy groups, all focused on placing player protections at the center of gambling ecosystems worldwide, which are rapidly evolving their digital technologies. The forum really emerged in response to aligned calls from brain health, mental health, and public health leaders for a coordinated approach to address harms happening across the population of people who gamble worldwide. This initiative operates under the Brain Capital framework. Gambling disorder is not a personal issue, but a public health issue and an economic issue. You also may be asking yourself, why are we talking about this now? Well, the gambling environment is rapidly digitizing, blurring with gaming and entertainment, which is creating a lot of interesting activity, which means more gamification, more monetization, and more dopamine hits, often available 24/7 in your pocket wherever you are. Hidden harms are on the rise, yet resources for prevention and recovery are scarce. There is a lack of screening in the community and a shortage of gambling disorder specialists, which means scalable, science backed, player first solutions are essential. Where is this forum headed? We had the privilege of attending the G7, and we got a lot of interesting work done there. And we held our second workshop group yesterday with a large group of individuals, which went extremely well. We're creating practical evidence based tools, processes, and guidelines to begin addressing stigma and harm before it starts. Our ideal landing spot would be frameworks that embed player protection into product design, policy, and research. We're building global alignment to shift player protection from compliance to true protections and resilience for individuals and communities. So today I have with me several members of the steering committee from the Better Gambling Forum. And I'm going to let each of them go around and introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about yourself. And if you could kind of cap it off with an introduction, cap off your introduction by explaining what player protection means to you and your role, that would be ideal. Paul.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much. My name is Paul Burns. I'm President and CEO of the Canadian Gaming Association. We are a national trade association representing operators and suppliers that participate in Canada's $23 billion gambling industry. We represent about 85 member companies from across the spectrum in both land-based and online and lottery businesses. For us, as an industry, and from the approach in Canada, while having had a long history of, because of government involvement in developing responsible gaming programming and player education, we also recognize the need as an industry that healthy relationships with players is important, and gaming activity and public education is going to be probably, I think, very critical and more so now in the digital age. And from an industry perspective, we recognize that healthy relationship is and more of the conversations turning. It's not a problem to be managed, but it's actually an understanding of a relationship and education and informing and building trust and a positive working relationship with your customer. We don't want customers that have gambling problems. We want to make sure that they can get help and learn and understanding the nature and causality of problem gambling is always one. And it's a foundation for us. It's built in having to work with gaming regulators. We believe in strong regulated gaming environments. We need more of them. But also working with the research community and public health community to better understand how people are interacting with our products. So I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to Pleasant.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vasiliki Panousi. I represent the European Gaming and Betting Association. We are an association of gambling operators who are established and licensed in the EU. EGBA members run a number of responsible gambling initiatives, including substantial work on standardizing, for the first time in Europe, markers of harm. We also promote sustainability, and we run a responsible gambling week every year, a sustainability report where we provide KPIs on how our members performing on providing safer gambling solutions. And we also do work on responsible marketing. For us, player protection includes a sustainable regulated framework that informs the player on where they can play safely, informs the player on the risks that gambling incurs, since the player needs to understand that gambling can be risky, but there are also available tools. And it's important also that the player knows the information on where to seek help. I'll wrap it up here. So.
Francis Kaiser. I'm an SVP of product at it's two company names, so it's IGT Everi. Recently merged, so we haven't come up with a singular name we'll be using yet. So across the IGT Everi portfolio of products, we are a global gaming supplier. So we supply, I want to call it that what we'd call the gaming side of the company: slot machines, Keno products, bingo products, poker products, table games products, iGaming products. Then we have another side we call the fintech side, so financial technologies. We're the largest payment provider across gaming. We're the largest kind of credit agency across gaming. We have the largest MarTech, marketing technology platforms, loyalty platforms, and we also supply a regulatory platform, so AML products and the like. So there's not really anything we don't do globally. So we have our hands in a lot of pieces of the global business and can really understand how players interact across the board in these gaming spaces. We design a lot of products that are meant for, we call it RG, restricted gaming, on both the fintech and on the gaming side of things. So that could be either game design products, making sure you call it a regulated space. There are certain gaming techniques you wouldn't use because they could increase harmful play. And then the financial technology side, making sure we develop budgeting tools, because a lot of times, as people are being entertained, they're going in and things are glitzy, they're having a great time. Maybe they're not always the best at monitoring their budgets. So we try to provide both those types of tools to allow people to continue to have fun and not get themselves into trouble. I would say, what does player protection mean to me? It really means trying to develop the right tools and provide those tools at the right time to patrons as they play to make sure you don't cause them any irreparable harm. This is an entertainment industry, and one thing that my boss tells me all the time is that this is about fun. Keep things fun. So for us, if you want to keep things fun, you have to make sure you're also protecting your end players and creating a sustainable environment.
Hi, everyone. Travis Sztainert. I'm the Director of Research and Education at the International Center for Responsible Gaming. So we are a funder of independent, peer-reviewed, high-quality research. So we sort of act as the firewall between, the sources of donations that we get in, and then the research itself. And so we sort of, do open calls for RFAs on different topics. Then it goes through a peer review process, very similar to NIH style, and then we end up funding the highest quality research. And so, part of this is, it's unique that we're talking about gambling here. I think, Dan, you mentioned a lot of the reasons why it's important, but just to put it into context, like the music industry in 2021 brought in $26 billion. It's a lot of money. Film, $100 billion. Books, $120 billion. And then video games, 190 billion. Does anybody want to guess how much gambling worldwide brought in 2021? 460 billion. So it puts the rest of the entertainment industry to shame. And so I think that gets across the sheer importance of this industry and why it needs to be addressed. And for me, player protection is really about prevention of gambling harms, and if not prevention, then at least minimization. And hopefully, the methods and the tools that we use to prevent the harm are, if not evidence-based, evidence-informed. Hopefully by ICRG research. So.
Always a pleasure spending time with you guys. Four very proactive individuals here in this space. Today, we're going to be covering four key themes for this particular talk: industry design and innovation, standards and accountability, policy and industry sustainability, and science and research gaps. So I'm going to just jump right in with Francis. You might want to grab that mic. There you go. How can product design directly support player protection while keeping things entertaining?
I kind of said, my first job is trying to keep things fun, keep things entertaining. But you do work in a business line where there is possibility of harm. While gaming is not inherently harmful, there is always that possibility that with a subset of your players, there could be harmful actions that impact their lives. It's an interesting experiment that happened in my life. So I'll just tell you that there's stigma in gaming. There's stigma in gaming. When I first started working for gaming, I was afraid to tell my parents that I worked in gaming. I was definitely afraid to tell my Southern Baptist and Southern Catholic grandparents I worked in gaming. I was like, oh boy. I'm gonna lie. I'm just gonna lie about what I do. So I got into this business, and I was first in the iGaming markets when I moved into the real money gaming space. And in the iGaming markets, there are, of course, a different maturity path than exists in the US markets. And I had the opportunity to build some tools that, using data and looking at fluctuation of bets, looking at average spend of players, I could pretty decently predict if someone was chasing what we call chasing a jackpot. I could look at their average spend and go, you know what? This is definitely something that they normally wouldn't do. So we developed these tools where when it would alert us, we would reach out to those players and we would say, hey, I see you're playing, or kind of ask them, never accusatory, make sure you never put individual blame on it, but are you still having fun? And go, okay, well, if you're not, we will give you back X amount of your spend, typically about 3/4 of their wagers, in a credit, if you'll take a 48-hour cool-off period. More often than not, the players would do that, which is good. They're like, okay, you know what? I do need a break. The interesting part that happened is, usually in a 24-hour period, they reach back out to us and they would thank us. They go, thank you. You know what? I think I've thought about it and I wasn't having fun. I'd gone too far. Thank you for letting me back off. Thank you for kind of resetting my play, and I'll come back to it. So you did this social, the correct social action. And there was an interesting byproduct of that. As we put out that feature, we saw that those players that kind of exhibited that behavior, typically stop playing in a 12 to 18-month period. Those players became call it more loyal to the brand, and their lifetime spend would increase from, call it, the 24 to 18 months to 36 to 48 months. So it had this interesting byproduct of actually making more money, making the industry more sustainable by doing the right thing. And for me, that was a big moment in my career, because I went, oh wow, I can work in this entertainment industry and I can help reduce the harm that happens for those players. And so that's just one example. I have tons of these examples because that kind of sent me down a path in the industry. On the gaming side, the fintech side, I learned from treatment folks like Dan about how budgeting tools can help a very large subset of players. I don't know if anybody's aware, I kind of said this yesterday, but my generation didn't really grow up learning to budget. We didn't have classes that taught us how to budget. So my parents luckily taught me. When I met my wife and we first moved in together, she had never seen a ledger before. She didn't know how to budget. I had to help her learn how to budget. And so seeing those amounts of money you spend can usually kind of jar somebody. I don't know if anybody used Amazon or other delivery services during the pandemic. I relied on them heavily. I didn't want to be in touch with any humans at all. And in 2022, I looked at my bill. And I don't want to tell you what that bill was because you would be embarrassed. Well, you'd probably be embarrassed for me. And then you'd probably call my wife and go, wait, did this happen? And she'd be like, yeah, I'm still mad at him. And I went, okay, I need to make adjustments in my spending. So just like I made adjustments because I saw that spend, we provide a lot of financial tools and alerts of, hey, this is what you've spent. This is what's happening. Here's your budget. Remember to make a budget. And we see, again, these players manage their funds much better. And the casino ends up with that benefit of, because they're managing their funds better, they're a longer lifetime, more sustainable player. So these things come together, and it's not something I think or believe. It's something I've done myself, and I know can happen. So I'm a very big proponent of it. Sorry for the long answers. I'm long-winded.
It's good stuff, though. Vasiliki, in terms of standards and accountability, what framework or accreditation standards best enforce player protection globally?
Yeah, so maybe just to start by mentioning that in Europe, online gambling regulations are heavily fragmented. So every country has its own regulatory scheme for gambling, including a safer gambling scheme. So at HBA, we initiated a project on standardizing markers of harm. That dates back actually in 2021, I think. Where we proposed to the European Committee on Standardization this idea of standardizing markers of harm, because we thought, okay, which is an area where we can find most things in common. And we found out that actually markers of harm have been studied. I'm not sure if they have been studied so much, but there is academic evidence on them. And luckily, we got the support of many European jurisdictions, and this project is now ongoing and it's coming to an end. And I think that by next week we will have the final vote coming out. So we propose to standardize 9 markers, and the idea is that gambling operators would have the opportunity to use them in order to safely predict risk and ultimately prevent harm. These are markers that have to do with financial elements like deposits, withdrawals, but also time elements, time that a player is spending in gambling, communication, how aggressively or not the player is engaging with the operator, if they beg for bonuses, if they ask for more. Time, stakes. So it's this combination of different behaviors that, when they are analyzed with AI, operators can make a very safe conclusion whether the player is at risk or not. Now, I would also like to mention that it was but it was a great experience, because we managed to gather together not only industry players, but also regulators, academia, health industry representatives. And we found out that, okay, there is a lot of fragmentation, many things happen in a different way, but there is some common ground on some understanding. So we were able to, for example, boil down to 9 markers and agree on definitions, agree on how do you define stakes, how do you measure the time. So it was a very fulfilling experience to see that we can, if we bring everyone together, we can actually make good conclusions on best practices and what's happening worldwide. And I think this is a message that I would like to deliver also today.
In collaboration with Brain Health is also starting to help progress those conversations as well. Paul, for policy and industry sustainability, how can industry associations build stronger bridges between commercial objectives and public health initiatives?
I think, in picking up on my colleagues here discussion, I think one of the things is the Battle Gambling Forum is actually one of the ways we're doing this. That it's a dialogue. We are built on a foundation of good, strong, effective, efficient regulation. And that comes from working with provincial, state, national governments. The gaming industry is very fragmented. In Canada, we're trying to move towards getting provincial governments who have oversight on to standardization, to try and build some commonality on a national basis, because the technology, the products are virtually the same everywhere, in the sense of what's available. The rise in digital gaming, it's not anonymous. It's very hard to be anonymous in a regulated gaming marketplace, which allows you to then to learn about player. So regulations, and we've used the term player protection up here. We couldn't have used that 5 years ago. I would have never said that language, because it really wasn't something we could do, because technology didn't allow us. But now monitoring player for risk in real time is now becoming standard in most jurisdictions. Not everywhere and not fast enough, but it's something we embraced. The province of Ontario is the first to fully regulate an online gaming market in Canada, put in that as a regulatory requirement. So every player. So it's not about how much money you spend or your time or others. It's about your play and your patterns and monitoring your player for change in behavior. So we can have interventions in education. So it's embracing these kind of conversations with a good, strong regulatory foundation, but also then it's, you understand for operators, as a point Travis pointed out, the life cycle of a player. Player acquisition costs for the gaming industry are exceptionally high. And then the fact of keeping a customer in a healthy, positive relationship with you is actually better in the long term. There's ROI in having good, strong, responsible gaming and gaming education programs. And understanding that that's something, again, probably 5-7 years ago, I don't think the gambling industry would have actually even believed. But that's exactly where the conversation is now going. And that's, so as we learn and we form, because partnership with education and academic and research is informing a lot of this and needs to inform. And it's without the dialogue, and in some jurisdictions, as my colleagues will know, there isn't any dialogue. And that's a problem. And that's one of the things we're trying to do through the forum, and the industry and operators coming to the table who have invested millions and millions of dollars in time and effort in making it a fundamental operational part of their business, want to make sure that what we're doing is effective and efficient, but it's growing across the world and into markets, because the gaming industry is becoming increasingly globalized. It wasn't at times. It grew as a regional, very different parts of the world. It's globalizing. And so understand, what can we learn from each other? And that's what we've started with this initiative, thanks to the Brain Capital Alliance, for allowing us to have this conversation in this forum, because it is about gaming as an integral part of economies. It's been around for decades and decades and not thousands of years. But the reality is that sometimes people don't want to have conversations. They don't want us to educate youth. Oh, gambling will become normalized. Yes, it is. Understand that. It is. So let's have the conversation so we can educate. Does it mean financial literacy? Yes, because that's part of young people today needing to learn budgeting and fun, because they can access this product. But it's also understanding it is only entertainment. And so all of these it's everybody bringing, and I said that's why the Better Gambling Forum is really a representative of what needs to happen everywhere. And that's what we're trying to do and bring everybody together, is to better learn, share, and the standardization, best practices will help us all better understand how to interact with this product, because we're also technology driven and innovation is happening. Regulators don't have the time sometimes to keep up with where the industry wants to go. And that's why dialogue is important, because we need to help regulators understand. Because there's other things like, we won't talk about the use of crypto in playing online gaming. Well, a lot of regulators are saying, we don't want that. Well, it's happening in parts in unregulated markets, which are not insignificant in size still in this world, because countries regulate internet differently. And so it's really it's an interesting time for us as an industry, where what we're able to do from where we came from, even less than a decade ago. So I'll stop there, and colleagues may want to chime in.
I started working in this space about 8 years ago, and I'm just going to second what Paul said. 5 years ago, there was no hope of collaboration or cooperation on any of this. And so it really is quite amazing to see how far it's come and how interested the space is becoming in helping protect its players. Travis, you're the science and research gaps fella. It's pretty much your entire life. So, what does the latest research tell us about the brain and gambling harms?
Yeah, so I mean, I hope this will be interesting to most people. But before I get into that, I just want to say, Tracy Parker's name's up there, and Vasiliki was so nice to fill in. Tracy's sad that she can't be here. She had to catch a flight, but she would have been great to ask this question to as well. This question is near and dear to my heart because back in the day when I was doing my PhD, which it was a number of years ago, I was looking at executive cognitive functioning and ghrelin. Now, ghrelin's a hormone in the blood. It's endogenous to the GHSR receptors, which of course there's a big concentration in the VTA, the ventral tegmental area, which is the reward circuitry of the brain. And so, basically, 6 years of my life summed up is eat before you go to the casino and you'll probably spend a little bit less. So there you go. That's so sad that could be summed up in that few of that sentence. Anyway, but yeah, so ghrelin it does seem to have a place in that. And interestingly, part of the way that GLPs and like Ozempic might work is by attenuating ghrelin. And so we see now in the literature, and there's some studies that ICRG is funding, looking at the role of GLP-1s and Ozempic in different models to curb craving for gambling, not only food. And we see that as well in alcohol, which is pretty cool. So I just want to start out by saying that, gambling is entertainment for most, right? I mean, but it can produce harms. And so when problems develop, they don't exist within a vacuum, right? It's very rare to have a person with problem gambling that's their only issue. In fact, it's over 80% comorbid with something, right? So it often co-occurs with depression, anxiety, substance use, or even conditions like brain injury. So, we know from brain injury imaging studies some of the antecedents and or consequences now of gambling harm and or problem gambling. So these include, reward system dysfunction, right? We know that gambling can cause heightened sensitivity to rewards. Now, whether that was a trait or a state, whether the person was predisposed to experience rewards in that way. I mean, that's why we have executive cognitive functioning tasks like the Iowa gambling test to try to see, what effects that has on the person. But going hand in hand with that is cognitive impairments, control impairments, right? So reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex from the imaging studies. It seems to undermine self-control. Again, is that an antecedent or consequence? Cue reactivity, so gambling cues really do trigger strong neural responses, which can fuel craving. And we have some really great new interesting research looking at neuromodulation, which I know is of interest to a bunch of people, using TMS, or even new research looking at TDCS, which is a little bit more accessible, if you will, to try to curb gambling problems by, maybe reducing craving or improving cognitive functioning in one way or another. So, we're seeing big differences between people as well, right? So it's not just about gambling. It's, some people are more impulsive, some people are more sensitive to rewards, some have stronger or weaker executive control, and these differences really matter when it comes to vulnerability for gambling-related harms. So, we are funding a number of studies, ICRG. We're looking at, we've funded some studies on brain injury and gambling, highlighting that damage to decision-making and impulse control regions increases risk for problem gambling. We're looking at, there's a study that came out of UCSF showing that depression further disrupts the way a brain's reward system responds to gambling. Barry Setlow at the University of Florida has demonstrated that impulsivity makes people overvalue uncertain rewards, so rewards where you don't know if you're going to win or not. And then Cole Vonderhaar at West Virginia, he's shown that early life stresses and sex differences, actually, to go back to what we were talking about before with women, it changes how reward circuits adapt to gambling-like tasks, and he does a lot of work as well with in rodent models, marine models. So the lesson here, to wrap it all up, it's if you want to treat the brain, you have to treat the person, right? The brain is part of the person. And gambling harm, it's not just about choice. It is really deeply connected to the mental health, addiction, trauma, and neuro rehabilitation of individuals. So it's all wrapped up. And, insofar as, brain capital is brain health and brain skills, right? We care deeply, I care deeply about the brain health of people that are going to engage in gambling.
This forum exists to make player protection a standard anchor, right? Not the exception. In the nice thing about what's going on with this group is, for the first time in ever, quite frankly, we had about 100 people at our forum yesterday, who are all minds from different backgrounds that are very interested, who work in this space on this problem. And it's really excellent to see this level of engagement, to see this start to bubble up to a conversation that we can have internationally around installing player protections as a standard and not the exception. And so, for one final thought in the matter of time, the forum has got big agenda, big initiatives, right? Why don't you guys each kind of go around and, share one thing that you think we can accomplish in the next 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, in the next 12 months, what I hope to come out of the forum is a list of what are the evidence-based practices that where the evidence can inform responsible gambling measures, and how can we take the research that's already happening, that's sitting on the shelf somewhere, and implement it, right? And in Canada, we call this knowledge mobilization, knowledge translation. In different jurisdictions, they call it dissemination and implementation research. But, there is a 17-year gap, statistically speaking, between, the findings of research and its implementation. Let's try to shrink that a little bit, right? Let's try to shrink that to 12 months. Let's try to shrink that to 4 months. And so I'm really hoping that through this forum, we can do some of that expediting research into influencing policy programs, initiatives, or at the very least, changing rhetoric, influencing behavior or attitudes.
In 12 months, I hope we can find a glossary of terms so we can better explain our industry to all of you. We use a lot of phrases, and we've heard it up here: problem gambling, responsible gaming, player protection. It's a long schism where people have had different language. I have one pet project, and that is to find some commonality and glossary of terms that actually we can then communicate, because sometimes even the treatment community doesn't understand some of the language we do, and some of government and regulators don't understand, well, what's the difference between problem gambling and responsible gaming? Because responsible gaming and responsible tools or player protection tools, as I keep using all these phrases, is very different about how we educate and give players, and destigmatizing for players that these tools are there to help you. It's not, you don't need them because you have a problem. You use them because so you don't have one. And we've spent too much time talking to problem gamblers and not just to gamblers about this. And so that's my hope. In 12 months we can find a simple glossary of terms to better be able to explain on a global level what we do.
First of all, I agree with my fellow panelists. I would just add that, perhaps except for talking about gaps and common best practices, we could also discuss measurements. I think that's also very important, because there is also a problem in finding common ground in how to measure, for example, problem gambling. So I think there is also ground for this discussion.
The thing I'd like to call it accomplishment in the next 12 months would be, my colleague here had mentioned the harm markers. I'd like to be able to validate those and agree to those globally, and then align at what point in, call it play, that you'd engage a customer through the right channel and with the right message. And that's really important when I say that, because I'm sure all of you know, millennials versus Gen X versus boomers. I shouldn't say boomers. Probably people might get offended. I apologize. Baby boomers. They all are used to engaging in different digital channels. Some people, even depend on demographic. They may prefer a phone call. They may prefer someone to come up and speak to them. They may prefer a text message, email, chat, push notification. I can keep going on with different types of engagement. But understand, like, from those harm markers, when I should engage them properly, make that message as personalized as possible, reduce any individual blame with the right voice. So make sure that you're bringing them toward, bringing them toward the solution that you feel is best to resolve that, and make sure we have the right tools. Make sure we have the right toolkit of when that happens, when that harm marker is identified, what do we provide that person to make sure they stay a healthy individual? I think that's just, that'd be my main goal. Then I have one little thing I'm going to add something because I never can stop talking, and that would be, Paul mentioned it. It was communication. It's not a policy piece, but I think that communication, that breaking down of silos. I'll say I was inspired yesterday when I saw researchers, regulators, policymakers, suppliers, operators just across the board working together to solve solutions. That open communication, I just think politically, geopolitically, and just in our daily lives has been broken a bit. I feel like we get into heated discussions and we forget that we need to listen. We need to make sure that it's okay. We're okay when we're challenged. Being challenged is good. That allows us to refine our thinking points, and that it's hard to do anything on your own. So if you do it together, you're going to be more likely to be successful. And also together, you're probably going to fail the first couple times you try to do something, and that's okay too. You're going to learn together. So that's not a policy piece, but I just think it's something that in everything everyone spoke about today, these kind of conversations are so valuable, because that's how we collaborate and move forward together.
Perfect. Well, you guys have been an excellent audience, so I'd like to thank you. In the spirit of Paul's request for common language, I'll be over in the corner providing translation services for anyone who doesn't understand the casino lingo. That said, you guys have been awesome. Thanks very much for your time, and we appreciate you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all so much.